Today I'm here with Andrew Kerr via Skype, and Andrew is an independent investigative journalist who runs the Citizens Audit. And the Citizens Audit's mission is to prove that regular Americans have the power to hold their governments accountable. Through unapologetic use of their First Amendment right to a free press, they will fulfill this mission by producing original research and insightful reporting on the critical issues of our time. And for the past few months, Andrew has been working on a series of articles, the most recent of which is Money Laundering Scheme Exposed, 14 pro-Clinton super PACs and nonprofits implicated. And Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
So to start, I want to talk about the person who is at the center of this money laundering, and that is David Brock, the person in charge of the Media Matters empire. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about David Brock and Media Matters and the associated 14 pro-Clinton related super PACs and organizations for the people who may not be up to speed?
David Brock has an interesting timeline. He actually started out his career as a conservative attack dog. That's he was dubbed as. He was actually commissioned to write a book on Hillary Clinton, and while he was writing that book, spending time with the Clintons, he had to change an ideology and switch to the left. He opened up he created a nonprofit organization called Media Matters. Essentially, Media Matters just has rooms full of servers analyzing conservative media outlets and quote unquote correcting conservative misinformation. Yeah, I believe that a free society needs watchdogs, but Media Matters takes it to a whole nother level. The amount that they influence public opinion, the attacks that they inflict on conservative media sources and politicians. A big reason why Glenn Beck, for example, left Fox News was because of the unending pressure from Media Matters. And this is an organization that receives tax-deductible donations. They're a tax-free organization. They also share office space with 13 other companies, 3 super PACs, 6 other nonprofits, a joint fundraising committee, an unregistered professional solicitor. It's just really dirty. It's a dirty operation, and I've been spending the past 2 months of my time just digging into this rabbit hole. And calling out David Brock for money laundering, and I'm just a guy, essentially.
Just a guy. Well, you know, the alternative media, the independent media, I think we're quickly becoming the media because there are no other mainstream reporters on this. And you say it's all publicly available information. So walk us through how this money laundering scheme works and what David Brock is doing. Yeah,
and I'd like to just touch on that I'm finding documentation that sometimes has been out there for years. And I'll try to look up, like, hey, what have other people said about this? And, I don't want to be issuing, or publishing sensational pieces, just hit pieces. Like, I want to be publishing accurate things. So I'm trying to disprove what I'm finding. But I look up online, hey, what's up with this record? Or what's up with, this activity? And there's nothing available because nobody's looking at this data. It's just, I'm the first person that has made this connection. And again, I'm just a guy.
Just a guy.
So yeah, so how they're the money laundering scheme. So the 14 organizations that operate out of David Brock's Washington D.C. address, they all utilize a professional solicitor, the Bonner Group, to raise funds for them. The Bonner Group also shares office space with David Brock, so they're literally in bed with them. They operate off of a 12.5% commission, which is not illegal, but it is considered to be unethical. Probably due to reasons why I'm going to explain in just a minute. But yeah, here's just one example of the trail of money from 2014. And every organization that I'm going to name shares office space and has David Brock as its chairman. So he leads these organizations. They all share the same office space. They all retain the Bonner Group for the fundraising. So Media Matters receives a $1 million donation. The Bonner Group gets a $130,000 commission, and Media Matters retains $930,000. Media Matters then gives that entire $930,000 to an organization called the Franklin Education Forum. The Bonner Group gets another $116,000 commission, and the Franklin Forum retains about $813,000. The Franklin Education Forum then forwards the remaining $813,000 to another organization called the Franklin Forum, which is a different organization. Franklin Education Forum and Franklin Forum are two separate organizations. The Bonner Group gets yet another $100,000 commission, and the Franklin Forum retains $712,000. So in the end, the Bonner Group got about a 33% cut in commission from that $1.6 million or $1.06 million donation, even though they advertise when they're soliciting that, hey, we operate off of a 12.5% commission. So we see money cycling in and out just constantly. In the same report, I mapped out the money transfers for all the organizations, and it's a pretty big chart, and that's just for 1 year. So it's a rabbit hole. It's deep.
And so not just double dipping, but literally triple, quadruple dipping. And to be clear, is this in any way at all legal?
No. Even if they weren't doing these money transfers, the Bonner Group isn't properly registered anywhere. 39 states and Washington, D.C. require solicitors who raise tax-exempt funds to register with that state or the district that, hey, I'm a professional solicitor. There's a lot of nonprofit scams out there, and states take it seriously. They want to know what your activities are. They require that you submit your active contracts, who you work with, what are the terms of your agreements. But the Bonner Group isn't properly registered anywhere. I haven't been able to find one state where they're fully properly registered. In Washington, D.C., their basic business license has been revoked since May 2015. But even when they did have an active business license, they've never informed Washington, D.C. that they're actually a professional solicitor. They just tell Washington, D.C., hey, we're a business and we operate here. In states that they do complete their registration, like in Colorado, they leave out about 90% of their activities. So it's just all wrong everywhere. And so yeah, even if they weren't doing these money transfers, the Bonner Group is raising funds illegally because they're not properly registered. And that's not a federal crime, but they're in a lot of trouble with a lot of states. I'll just say that.
Well, and of course, that's a big reason why we have all these laws in the various states, because states are very worried about their tax revenue being hidden by the super wealthy through a series of charities that then keep it out of essentially where anybody can find it. And so you would think that people would be up in arms over this. And let me ask you, do you think part of the reason why you are probably, if not definitely, the first person to stumble across all this is because Media Matters is a left-wing entity? David Brock is a far left-wing agent. They support Hillary Clinton. And that's why nobody in the mainstream media is tackling this.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but when I've been talking to my family about this research, or just my friends, a lot of times I'll get feedback like, well, that the right, they do this too, or most of that stuff is happening on the right. It's like our country has been misinformed by thinking that all the bad stuff just happens on one side of the aisle. So the right, or the conservative side of our politics, gets a lot of attention. And to be quite honest, rightfully so. Our politicians we should be watching over all of our politicians, even if it's our preferred side. If we look at the Republican establishment right now, I feel the conservative media just kind of let them go unnoticed, and now nobody likes them. That the same thing is not happening on the left. They're just not looking into these things. They just dismiss it and don't even bother to look at it. And when I think if you have a person like David Brock that knows that nobody's going to be looking at this stuff, all I have to do is make sure that the balance sheet equals out at the end of the year, and I'll be fine. Then yeah, it just opens up a a vast array of abuses that they've just been getting away with for so long.
And let me ask you, to the best of your knowledge, do you have any idea what the Bonner Group is spending this skimmed money on?
It's really hard to tell. There's only so much that we can glean from the surface. A couple of theories that I have is that they are bringing in dirty money, and they're cycling it out. I'm just like a traditional money laundering scheme. They cycle it, small transactions here and there, relatively, to then kind of make it look like clean money. Another option is that they're doing this in order to keep their tax-exempt status for the 7 nonprofits. If you're a nonprofit organization and you receive 100% of your funds in form of a money grant from another nonprofit organization, then you can claim to the IRS that you're a publicly supported organization because you're supported by another publicly supported organization. But if, say, Media Matters is fudging their accounting and they don't actually deserve that public status, but then they're giving all these grants to other organizations that are then kind of leeching off of Media Matters public status, it's just that's just a theory of mine. I don't have any facts to back that up because there's only so much that we can glean from the surface. But part of what I'd like to see from this is to get enough attention and kind of force the IRS and the FEC, the Federal Election Commission's hand, and tell them to do their jobs. I'm literally performing an audit on these organizations. It's a very intentional naming of my website because that's what needs to happen. A full audit needs to happen. They need to open up their books to the investigators because, as I reported at the end of my most recent article, David Brock apparently was blackmailed $850,000 because one of his previous associates was claiming that, hey, if you don't, fix this personal problem that we're having, I'm going to accuse you of financial abuse. I'm going to contact all your donors and the IRS, and this is going to stink for you if you don't resolve it now. So he has something to hide. I think this is it. And this is all the information that I'm gathering is just publicly available on the surface level. I can only imagine what's actually happening inside David Brock's office.
Well, and you mentioned the blackmail. I mean, I can't imagine paying such an exorbitant blackmail request unless, like you say, there's something serious that's being hidden. And so, how do we know that David Brock knows this is taking place, that it's not just some rogue member of Media Matters handling all of this?
He is the chairman of every single organization, aside from the Bonner Group. Every organization, he's the chairman, and he collects pay from most of them. Furthermore, on their tax return documents, he says that he puts time into each organization, at least an hour a week. Now, yeah, he isn't the chairman of the Bonner Group, but he shares a rental in the Hamptons with Mary Pat Bonner, the president of the Bonner Group. So, I mean, he vacations with his solicitor that he's funneling money into. He can't claim ignorance on this. He just can't.
And the Bonner Group is something that I don't think a lot of people have heard of, but if you start digging down the rabbit holes, the name comes up over and over and over again. What do we know about the Bonner Group?
Well, I started this research about a couple months ago when I opened up Media Matters, their 2014 tax return. I noticed that all of their funds came in through the Bonner Group, and I looked up the Bonner Group online, and aside from one article from the New York Times, nothing came up. No website, no information, nothing. And so that's some red flags there. That raises an alarm. Don't really know much about them, aside from the fact that they exist. Their business is incorporated in Virginia. We can see, that they claim in Virginia that they operate out of David Brock's office in D.C. If they were properly registered, we would have insight into their active solicitation contracts, who they work with, their client lists, who they receive donations from. Some states require that solicitors submit that information, but they're not properly registered, so we don't know.
Wow. And this is a company that apparently has its tendrils in Media Matters, which has been called the most powerful democratic platform that there is. So tell me, you found a connection between Media Matters, or maybe not Media Matters directly, but one of David Brock's super PACs and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Can you tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, so the Federal Election Commission, on their website, they have a database that you can go through and search all of a political campaign's transactions, and also super PACs submit their financials to political campaigns as well. All that information is publicly facing. It's a bit of a drag to go through it, but there's ways to manage the bulk data and find what you're looking for. So I opened up Clinton's Hillary for America committee, which is the Clinton campaign. They're one and the same. And I noticed that they made a payment to American Bridge 21st Century Super PAC in December 2015. American Bridge 21st Century is one of David Brock's organizations, shares office space with Media Matters and the Bonner Group, and they are a super PAC that's devoted to opposition research. So they focus their efforts on researching political candidates, pulling up a video from the 70s where the candidate's in the background, and they're like, hey, did you hear that mutter that he said under his breath? Like, so, I mean, let's, as a quick aside, you have American Bridge 21st Century that focuses on opposition research for political candidates, that shares office space with Media Matters that performs opposition research on conservative media platforms. So that's happening. But the Clinton campaign purchased research from them in 2015. And it has a transaction ID. So I looked up that transaction ID and nothing came up. Absolutely nothing. And this happened 9 months ago. I honestly couldn't believe it at all. I looked further into the data. If you go on the site, this is the first article that I posted. I go pretty in depth, pretty technically on how they get away with it. But to make a long story short, the Clinton campaign got away with this transaction. It's gone unnoticed because they claimed that they were making a payment to a non-political organization, when in fact American Bridge 21st Century is a super PAC. They have the option to select PAC for PAC, but they log the transaction as ORG. Now, the Federal Election Commission has a master data file. They have 7 data files for most transactions that are recorded on their site. And they have a data file that's titled any transaction from one committee to another. So this transaction from the Clinton campaign committee to American Bridge 21st Century committee should have showed up there, but it didn't, because the Clinton campaign recorded as a payment to a non-political organization, and it didn't. The FEC probably has a bunch of policies in place to flag a questionable transaction, but obviously those policies were not triggered just because the Clinton campaign fudged their accounting for that transaction.
And for those who don't know, it's completely illegal for a candidate to have contact with their super PAC. I remember just in recent memory, Ron Paul got in big trouble for this in 2012, and it was one of those issues that kind of kept coming back and coming back and coming back that I don't know if he was ever really able to overcome. But then you've got Hillary Clinton, who apparently does this in a way that is easily trackable using public information, and nothing comes from it. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about these 14 entities that may or may not be distinct that all share an office space. Do we know for a fact that there are people working there, or is it just Media Matters with all these different names connected to them?
No, we can see on their tax return documents that they're claiming to the government in official tax returns and submissions to the FEC that they do operate here. There are 2 foundations that work there, and to my knowledge, it's not unusual to see foundations, a 501c4, not have any paid employees because they just exist to distribute money. So that's fine, but most of these organizations they pay employees, and they share the same board members. You see the same names come up over and over again, and they all claim to be unrelated to each other, which is a future article that I'm going to be writing, offering some clarification on that. But they've got a lot of issues with their tax return documents, a lot.
And we'll look forward to reading it. Now, I wonder if you can tell us, and we'll wrap up shortly, but Correct the Record is something that I've talked about to my viewers before. I believe it's Hillary Clinton's shadow organization that corrects the record. Whenever somebody says something wrong about Hillary Clinton, they swoop in to correct it. And to be clear, this is associated with David Brock. Yeah,
they share office space with Media Matters and American British 21st Century, the progressive research institutions. They operate right alongside them. Same exact office space.
And they are potentially part of the money laundering as well, or are they too new to be involved in that?
Well, we can see their transactions because they're a super PAC. They submit to the FEC their financials, so we're only 3 months behind with those filings. So they are sending money to Media Matters and to other organizations. However, the IRS tax returns for nonprofits, they're released 2 years after the fact, which is normal. So we only have access to the 2014 tax returns. I could make an article saying, like, yeah, look at these transfers are still happening today. But since I don't know that for sure, and it's really important for me that everything that I post is fact-based, and I'm trying to avoid using circumstantial evidence or hearsay evidence. This is as solid as it gets, the information that I'm presenting. But yeah, it's incredibly likely that this is continuing today. We just can't tell for sure because we don't have all the information available to us.
Okay, and again, this is shocking information that directly implicates David Brock, Media Matters, and again, Hillary Clinton's campaign is directly involved in this corrupt cabal. Andrew, where can we find you online? How can my viewers keep up to date with your articles and your social media presence and everything else?
My website is www.thecitizensaudit.com. I have a Facebook group under thecitizensaudit.com, and I have an RSS feed. To be honest, I opened up this website 2 weeks ago, and while part of me was expecting it to get this type of attention, it's a very pleasant surprise to even be giving this interview right now, because 2 weeks ago I was just a guy with a bit too much free time on his hands that has trouble going to bed at night sometimes. So, Facebook, The Citizens Audit, www.thecitizensaudit.com. I'm racing to the finish line. It's important for me to finish documenting everything by the end of September to give people the time to process this information. So I'm prioritizing that over, spending most of my time trying to push this story, which is why I'm exhilarated to be doing this right now, because this is helping me accomplish that goal of outreach while I can still focus on finishing this project up.
Okay, well, we're thrilled to have you here, and we're thrilled that there's somebody out there doing this information. And I hope when the next big batch of articles comes out, you'll come back on and give us an update.
Yeah, we're at the finish line. I only have a couple more, but yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm sure it's just going to get crazier from here.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Andrew.
Thanks, Tom.